let's talk about all the smut I read during 2020. So smut, of course, was a big part of getting through 2020 for me. We all know that I love erotica here on this channel, so of course there has been a lot that I have read since May that I haven't gotten a chance to talk about. I'm probably gonna have to split this up into 2 videos because I like my videos to be between 10 and 20 minutes long, and I feel like there's just too much to talk about in this one video. The next book I read was Harvest of Sighs by Simone. This is the 3rd book in the Thornchapel series. The Thornchapel series is about a group of friends who essentially feel compelled to come back to this mansion that they haven't been to since they were kids. And essentially all these complicated sexual feelings end up taking place between all of them, essentially, but there are some core groups throughout. I loved the first 2 books. The first 2 are just so good. The first book was a great solid foundation. The atmosphere is so palpable. The second book is my favorite in the series. I just loved it. I feel like it really delved deeper into the emotions of some of these characters, and it really like heightened the stakes. I didn't like the twist like anyone else who read the second book. The ending, the final twist was just really stupid, and you knew that eventually they were going to like try and work their way out of it. I was surprised that it doesn't happen in this book because I definitely thought they were going to work their way out of it sooner rather than later. But enough about the first 2 books. I'm here obviously to talk about this 3rd book, and it gave me a lot of complicated feelings. I loved certain parts of it and then really didn't like other parts. But mostly I just felt myself underwhelmed. I'm currently reading the 4th book and I'm even more underwhelmed by that one. But the 3rd book, I feel like its strongest points are still Auden and Saint Sebastian. I still don't like the stupid twist, but I guess it tore them apart in ways that felt realistic. I mean, not realistic because of the circumstance, but you understood why they worked together. Which I feel like is a problem in a lot of romance novels where you're just like, can you get over your shit and get back together? With this situation, it was like, yeah, no, I get it. Although I do wish that they had thought of another way to do that. I feel like their entire storyline in this book revolves around them longing to be together, and it definitely makes their situation more intense because even though they want to be together so bad, they can't. And I really enjoyed all of their scenes together, even if I kept going like, ick, this is weird. I still just, overall, Simone made it work, and I was happy for that. The Rebecca and Delphine stuff, which I was expecting to be the majority of this novel, it just didn't work so much for me. I thought that their storyline was great, but it felt like a completely different novel than everything else. I feel like the thing with Thornchapel is the mansion itself is what creates so much of the atmosphere of the storyline, and to take Rebecca and Delphine out of the mansion really made it just like a completely different tone from the rest of the book. I enjoyed their storyline, but it just didn't work to me and it didn't flow with the rest of the story. I feel like all the characters kind of have to be together for the story to work. And then there was the stuff with Beckett, which I thought I knew where that was going, but now that I'm reading the 4th book, I really don't quite understand where that's going, and I don't really understand the point of it. He just still feels so unconnected from the rest of the group. And with Poe, I still continue to find her incredibly boring. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't everything I wanted it to be, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was Cruel Magic by Eva Chase. This is the first in a series. I'm not sure what the series name is though. This is about a girl whose parents end up being murdered, and she gets taken away to this magical school where she finds out that she's actually like this huge big deal because she's one of the founding fathers, or she's one of the founding families of this school or something. When she gets to the school, she finds out that all the founding family's sons are all essentially sexy douchebags. And from there, they start this like magical war. She never knew she had the ability to exhibit magic, and so now she's trying to catch up on all the years that she's missed to become the like person she was always meant to be. This is going to become a reverse harem series, but in this first book, it does not do that. She only really has any sort of connection with one dude. Overall, I enjoyed this series. I found it very easy to read, but there wasn't anything to really hook me. You really don't get as much interaction with the potential love interest as I was expecting to be in a smutty series. I think this was really just a book that was like laying the foundation for a series, but for me, I need more. I need a reason to continue on. Because if I'm not immediately hooked, then there's nothing to make me want to pick up book 2. If you're really into something that's like slow burn, bully, reverse harem, then I think this would totally be for you. I don't think the writing was bad. It was actually pretty decent. The character was decent enough. The world definitely has like stuff to explore. But I just don't know if I will definitely continue on the series or not. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. The next thing I read was The Unrequited by Saffron A. Kent. This is student-teacher erotica, and I've read student-teacher eroticas before, and I kind of assumed I knew where this was gonna go, but the thing about this book is the characters are just so unique that I feel like this completely sets itself apart from any other teacher-student romance I've ever read. I'm so used to characters who are like a little bit broken that come together and they can only heal each other or some bullshit like that, and that's not just student-teacher eroticas, that's just dark romance in general. But usually the characters are broken in kind of all the same ways, whereas these characters were very uniquely broken. They were very different. The main character talks about how she always gets obsessed with guys to the point where like this romance like overtakes her entire life and her mind, even though like it's not actually a romance. She's kind of built it up into that. And that is how this situation kind of starts out with this teacher. This teacher is like working through his own problems and she kind of gets obsessed with him. I appreciate that he was kind of a prickly asshole, but like I don't feel like he was ever softened totally. I feel like so often in dark romances, all of the shitty dude's behavior is excused by his dark past or his problems or whatever. And this guy, he had problems. But I don't feel like they tried to excuse away his behavior by telling us his problems. Like they of course explored that, and I feel like the author actually explored his problems really well and explained his mindset and everything going on in his life really well without excusing his prickly shitty behavior. And I of course enjoyed his shitty behavior because that's what I look for in a dark romance. I feel like the main character was just so unique, and she's not like any other character in a romance novel that I've ever read about. You definitely don't always understand her actions. She's constantly doing things that don't seem like a good rational idea, but that's just a part of her character. The sex scenes were really good and unique. And overall, I feel like if you love a taboo dark romance that also has some complicated emotions behind it, I feel like this is a really good choice. And I gave this 5 out of 5 stars, and I will absolutely be reading from this author again. The next thing I read was Devil's Daughter by Katee Roberts. This is kind of a mystery, thriller, detective, smut novel. It has to do with this girl who comes back to her hometown to investigate a cult that her mom is involved in. I honestly don't remember a lot about this book. I was reading it as an ebook, but after about 30% I just couldn't do it anymore, so I ended up listening to it on audiobook after that. And overall, I just really didn't enjoy it. I gave it 2 stars. There was nothing memorable about it. I was shocked because I've read Katee Roberts before and really enjoyed her work, but this one just did not do it for me at all. If you're interested in Katee Roberts, I would definitely still recommend her. I would just recommend you stick with her newer stuff. The next thing I read was Filthy Gods by Scarlett. I feel like this is kind of your typical dark romance. This is about a girl who goes to school with this rich asshole, and they're kind of in a rivalry to get like the top spot in their class or whatever. And honestly, things progress exactly how you'd expect them to progress. Things are complicated because of the fact that she works for this hotel that like his family owns over the summer, and they start up a sexual relationship. And of course feelings get involved, etc, etc. This literally was like by the book, exactly how you think it's gonna go, sort of erotica. There was nothing that great about it. I think this is a prequel to a series, so I might still try the rest of the series, but like overall, this just did nothing for me. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because the writing was fine, the characters were fine. It's just something I've read a million times before. The next thing I read was Cruel Black Hearts by Candace Wondrak. This is a series, and this is the first book in this series. I don't know what the series is called because I am most definitely not continuing on with it. This is a reverse harem, I believe, but the first book I think only has her hooking up with 2 guys, but I believe it might go up to 3 after this book. This is about a girl who works for a newspaper, I believe, and who constantly is writing about serial killers because that's what she's obsessed with. When all of a sudden there's a serial killer in their town and a bunch of girls keep dying, so she becomes obsessed with that as well. Eventually, she meets these two guys who are serial killers themselves, and they all start a relationship together. The writing in this was really bad. The characterization was also really bad. The main character I found pretty insufferable because she's very much that not like other girls character, except that all the ways she was not like other girls were all very like typical basic bitch things that I'm like, there's nothing wrong with those things, but being obsessed with true crime does not make you not like other girls. And I just found myself constantly rolling my eyes whenever any of the guys would talk about how amazing she was and how different she was and unique, and I'm like, in what way? There was also this constant reference to her eyes because she has one eye that's different colors than the other eye, and I was like, you really don't need to mention this every second page. I get it. It's not that interesting. And I could get past all of that if the dynamic between the main character and her love interest was interesting, but personally, I just wasn't that invested in that either. The sex scenes were subpar, and the writing overall was just something I wasn't into, so I definitely won't be continuing on with this. There was a twist at the end that was pretty ridiculous, and I was just kind of like, okay. And if the writing had been better, maybe that would have gotten me to read the next book, but in an already bad book, a weird twist isn't going to make me pick up the next one, because I just don't have the confidence that the writer can pull off the twist in any meaningful way. So I gave that 2 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Wanderlust by Skye Warren. Wanderlust is about a girl who's kind of lived a very sheltered life, never leaving her home because her mom has some sort of disorder that, you know, she's super overprotective. And finally, when she decides to leave and take on her dream of going to Niagara Falls for some reason, she ends up getting kidnapped at a restaurant. At a rest stop. The guy who kidnaps her decides to basically use her as his sex slave, and she ends up enjoying it, and they fall in love, and you know. Skye Warren is someone I've always heard really good things about, and so I've always wanted to read one of her books, but I feel like maybe I shouldn't have started with this because I just didn't love it. Once again, maybe it's because I've read so many dark romances in my time that, and I feel like dark, smutty books really have to do something extra to set themselves apart, and this one just didn't. The writing wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either. The characters were exactly what I've seen in a million other smut books where the guy is rough around the edges but has a good heart underneath. The girl is so sheltered and naive, but you know, she's tough and really into some dirty stuff, of course. It's just not a book that I think I'll really remember anything from, or even remember that I read it a year from now, so I gave it 2.5 stars. The next 2 books are from the same series, and that's the Havoc at Prescott High series by C.M. Stunich. And those 2 books are Chaos and Mayhem, and they're the second and third books in that series. This is a reverse harem bully romance. It takes place at a high school, which I hate. I really wish that authors would stop putting dark romances in high school. It is so uncomfortable. In my head, I just like cast the characters as actors who are like 25 because I just can't get behind high school characters. Especially because honestly this would make more sense if they were out of high school, because it's all related to this gang called Havoc and how they kind of run the school, but since they're graduating soon, they want to kind of move up to running the town. And I'm like, once again, this would make more sense if they were like 25, because pretending that 16-year-olds are just running this town and running the underground is really silly. The main character of this series hires these boys to kind of take down a list of people that she has that have treated her like crap for the past 10 years of her life. And slowly but surely she connects and has sexual relationships with all of them. This series is not good, but I absolutely love it. This is my guilty pleasure series for sure. It's one of those things where I read it and I'm like, yes, this writing is bad, but I love it so much that I don't care. I have a huge smile on my face the entire time I'm reading it, and I will say that what actually happens in the books isn't as good as the stuff that's like happening in my mind because of the books. because like there are certain characters I just love so much that I end up like thinking about them afterwards and like thinking about the way things could go or the way things could have gone. And I think that's what I enjoy about the series. So once again, it's not really the books themselves so much as my own imagination with these characters. The thing is, because this book is about a gang of boys, they're all very much different versions of the bad boy trope. So I feel like it would be very easy for all the boys to blend together, and yet Stunich does a pretty good job of differentiating each boy from each other and differentiating the dynamics that the main character Bernadette has with each boy. Because even though she does have sex with all these boys and she does like have feelings for them to some degree, I feel like the feelings are different and like the conversations are different between each of them. You could take out so many pages of this if you just took out all the repetitious bullshit. The amount of times I am told about how bad this gang is, how tough Victor Channing is, about what a badass Bernadette is, or how she has been through so much shit in her life. I'm like, yeah, like I get it. You don't need to tell me in 800 different ways how tough these characters are. We have established that they are in a gang who kills people on the regular. So I get it. I don't need to hear about it literally every page. And when I say it's every page, I'm not exaggerating. She just finds different metaphors to use to explain how tough these characters are on every single page. It's just very grating, and if that was taken out, I feel like I would be able to recommend these books a lot higher. Whereas I think if you're looking for a trashy, good, fun time, I would definitely recommend these. If you're looking for good writing, I absolutely would steer clear of these. I gave the second book 4 stars and the third book 3 stars, and those stars are specifically for enjoyment alone, especially because of Oscar and Callum specifically. And the last book I'll talk about in this series is Claimed by Elle Kennedy. This is a dystopian smutty novel, which I kind of love the idea of. Once again, when you've read so many erotica books, you kind of want something that has a unique premise, and this one does. I've read one dystopian series before this and really enjoyed it, but it had like a lot of flaws, so I was hoping that this one would kind of fill that gap for me. It's been a while since I've read this, so I don't remember the exact details, but I believe this takes place in a world where electricity has gone down. You know, the world kind of crashed, and now this is like years and years later, and things have already like reestablished themselves. There's already this kind of compound where a lot of folks live, and it's governed by the main character's brother. And of course, it's governed quite cruelly, and the main character decides that she wants to leave this compound behind and live as an outlaw. On her journey, she meets up with this group of guys, and of course she starts a sexual relationship with the main guy. I really liked this at the beginning, especially because the sex scenes are pretty great. Not only is she hooking up with the main guy, but there's this other flirty guy that she kind of has connections with. It's more of a friendly hookup situation, I guess, but basically the sexual tension between her and the main guy and her and this other guy is great. The sex scenes between them are great. And I just found it was very unique. I didn't know where it was going. I liked the friendship dynamic between the other guys in the group and her, and I was just really overall enjoying it. Unfortunately, the second half really let me down. The second half of this book got so formulaic and so by the numbers and decided to go in a route that was exactly like every other romance book that isn't a dystopian. It just felt too neat and tidy and felt too scripted and forced and almost too like romantic, I guess, which totally isn't my thing, obviously. I just wish that it had continued doing crazy shit, basically. I felt like one of the great things about this erotica was that it kept kind of like upping the ante with every sex act, which is something I really enjoy, when they can top every sex scene by doing something crazier in the next sex scene, and that's how I felt like this was going. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what they're gonna do next. And yeah, what they did next was become really, really boring. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. If this sounds like something you're interested in, I definitely wouldn't steer clear of it. It's still worth a read if you're not as opposed to romance as I am. But I'm not going to continue on this series. The next book isn't about these 2 characters anyways. It switches off on other characters, and while I liked the other characters, but because of how much this disappointed me in the end, I just don't really feel like reading the rest of the series. Though I do enjoy Elle Kennedy as a writer overall. I'm going to do a part 2 of this video where I will talk about the rest of the smutty novels I read, which have some of my absolute favorites. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll come back again soon. Bye.